Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lynchburg Electoral Board October meeting, which is actually our November meeting. This is our second October meeting. So we don't need to meet next week. And thank you all for being here. We have what we think is a quick agenda today. Surprises are always waiting. But we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and then introductions.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll ask the people on stage to introduce themselves. I'm David Newmeyer. I'm the chair of the Lynchburg Electoral Board.
I'm Steve Troxel. I'm the vice chair of the electoral board.
I'm Betty Gibbs, the secretary of the electoral board.
I'm Dan Pence, I'm the registrar.
I'm Nancy Davis, the deputy registrar.
Thank you all. As usual, our agenda will include public comments at the end of our business. So I ask the audience to hold comments until that time. And I don't have any other comments for this meeting. Let me ask next then, are there any additions for our agenda? My colleagues have anything?
I think everything we discussed is covered under new business.
Without objection, then we will adopt the agenda as proposed. We have the minutes of October 5th to approve. Do we have any edits for that set of minutes?
Well, I will just mention that I wanted to make a change to the announcement, but I've already been told. You have to turn it on. I had an amendment I wanted to make to the announcements, but I've already been told that I will be outvoted, so
You already made the change.
Betty and I disagree about it. But if you're looking at the minutes, it's potential backup location for precinct 401. And the staff there is willing to discuss details after November.
I make a motion that we adopt the minutes as they are.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's adopted. Thank you. Announcements. I have one announcement to make, which is that I have asked that our December 7th meeting, which will be our last meeting of the year, begin at 3 p.m. rather than our customary 4 p.m. And our registrar is checking to make sure that we can have this auditorium at that time. That was my only announcements. Does our registrar have any announcements?
Nothing other than what's in my report.
Thank you, Dan. Well, let's proceed then with your reports.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let's just make sure I'm sharing the right screen. That goes into start at the top of the report. Start here.
Can you speak into your microphone?
Yes, I will. Let me get this showing correctly on the screen. Okay. All right, can you hear me okay now? Is that better?
Much. Even I can hear you.
All right. Registrar's report for this month, like was mentioned, this is actually the report that we will be doing in the beginning of November, but we are doing a second meeting in October. And so some of the numbers that you see here will be slightly abbreviated just because I've done from beginning of the month down through date. So if I actually did it all the way through the end of October, which we haven't got there yet, they might be slightly different, but not too far different. We got most of the data into the month. All right, table of contents like we've seen before. Just going to talk about some statistics. Going to talk about where we are with the budget And our next election is already here upon us, so we'll talk about what's going on with that. Some ongoing projects and some recommendations and just announcements that I have at the end there. Okay, so this is a report that we've discussed in previous meetings, and based on some recommendations from other registrars, I think rather than try to do a delta between this report and another report, we should look at this report by itself. And then I have some other statistics that I've been able to do another report that hopefully will answer some of the board's questions. And if not, we can iterate till we find the right information that they would like to capture month to month. This is a report that Betty suggested we have early on, and so basically it's registering counts by locality. It basically shows all of the precincts and who's active, who's inactive, does a total count, and then breaks down just the military, overseas, and federal separately. So is there anything you would like to ask further about this report, these statistics?
Well, I think the locality statistics that on the next page answers the questions that I don't get answered on this page.
Okay, so that's why I included that, and hoping that that will be going in the direction that you want. So let's just look at that. Sorry, by the way, it's a lot of numbers on a page, and it's a little hard to see out in the audience there. But it's an attempt to kind of get a breakdown that I think the board wants to know. Just so you know, this is locality statistics gets created. It doesn't come out in this format. I have to do a little bit of cutting and pasting together like this. But it shows on the very left-hand side next to the precinct number, the beginning total of what was in the precinct. And then as you go across, it tells you basically what was in, what was out, transfers in, transfers out, what was purged for some reason by the registrar, who was deceased, or the numbers of deceased, numbers of felony, and then all the way over when you finally go over to the other end on the right-hand side, you'll see it shows a net change, and then the total number for that precinct. And of course, I've done the summary totals at the bottom, and you'll see that we actually, in this month, we went from 55,673 to 55,825, so this is a net uptick of about 100 change there.
Okay, so just, you get re-register, just looking at the top row, re-registration, new, reinstated, transfer in, what's CHG in?
Well, that's a change in and change out. Don't think that captures the new and reinstated. So maybe it's I would say it's a different category of inbound.
Okay, because I mean, you get change out, and then you get transfer out, I'm assuming. So I'm just curious if you could let us know next meeting what those particular.
Yeah, I can drill down in detail on change in, change out. And
yeah, I just want to know, you know, how they are defined when they're put together.
Yeah.
And then registration purge, deceased, felony, incoming,
should be incoming. Sorry,
incoming.
the
Okay.
column is not very.
And then registration error, moved out of state, and then asked to be removed, I guess,
Right.
per choice.
Okay. And it's possible, by the way, I just basically took the columns that were there. You may decide that some of the columns that seem to be zero all the time, we could eliminate some of those, but
Yeah.
for now, I just put everything in there. Okay, questions or further thoughts on this? Is this more toward what you like is a useful metric of changing from month to month? You don't have to decide that right now, but that's the open question that I have.
You're moving, as far as I'm concerned, you're moving in the right direction.
Okay.
I agree. There's an interesting jump in an increase in registrations in 302. Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah, so we had Liberty, some folks in Liberty acting as a third party registrant, and they did bring in registrations. It was, less than 100, but it was on the order of what you see here.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay, move on to the next slide. This is the 2023 statistical report. We just track this month to month. And as I think been stated before, this is just a bit of a tracking sheet to show you kind of where we're getting our registrants from. As always, the DMV, we get, now that it's by default, when you register with the DMV, you are sent through as a new registrant to the registrar. So you'll see that that's where we get most of ours from. And there are other categories. Third-party drive, I think Jeff was asking about that last time. It's 91 this time, and that would include probably some of those new registers from Liberty, plus maybe some other ones that have fallen under that category. That gives you a bit of a sense also of kind of how many registrations we've processed for the month.
Do you know whether these include any, it says registration report, does it include any people that have requested to does it include any, a report of the people that have asked to be unregistered for various reasons, or people who moved out of state? Is this strictly registration activities?
This is incoming registrations, and it's basically designed to show you the source of where those registrations are coming from. So this isn't a plus and minus report.
I'm just, okay, well, when it says registration report, sometimes there are forms that people ask to become unregistered, and I just didn't know whether that was included.
Not included here.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on that?
Sure.
Here's where we stand for a registrar department. As usual, we have 3 pages of this. Again, apologies for those who are it's a little small. I don't know how to get this bigger to be seen more easily, but just a couple of notes on this. And I can make a copy of this as well for you on the screen. One second. Okay, there's some categories here where we are charging money that has run over our budget amount, although overall, I'll talk to you in a minute about our overall. And that would be, in particular, the one that jumps out to me is our temporary personnel services. And so we've paid out about $10,000, $10,831 in that since the beginning of the fiscal year, June. And we really only had budgeted $5,407, 95 cents. Not sure how we came to that number for the budget, by the way. Or I'm sorry, excuse me, that is our current transactions for this month. And our budget was actually 0. So talking to the finance department about this, what they suggested is that we've actually front loaded our temporary personnel services budget over into the electoral board side of the budget. So if you look at the next page, flip that over, you'll see that we actually have $53,900 budgeted over there. And I asked them, should I be, taking my temporary personnel in the office who are doing early voting, and should I be applying that those charges over to here? And of course, that's actually not a question she was able to answer. She's like, well, kind of, it's up to you. So something to talk about with you do you want me to alter how I'm applying this budget? She didn't feel like it was material at this point, because at the end of the day, as long as we're actually within our overall budget limit, it seems, our budget directives, then we should be fine, even if they have to do kind of a journal account to match it all up at the end. Or she said next year, or next time we do the budget, maybe you want to realign some of the budgeting items with how you are actually allocating the spending. So just a note for your thoughts.
Dan, which line is the electoral board line?
It's under temporary personal services on page 2, and it is, the code is 3300, and the individual item is 3300-.0001. And sorry it's so cryptic, this is how the world financial system of the city uses codes things.
So basically, we had no budget for temporary personnel.
Right, on the registrar side, but if you look on the electoral board side, you'll see on the left-hand column there, we have a adopted budget of 53,900. So I think, like I said, she told me she doesn't feel it's material. At the end of the day, the question is whether or not we're running our run rate against our budget is really, flat or ahead or behind. But I asked her about this because I saw that, it was showing, it canceled out the amount we've done year to date. And I said, why did that, why did you get a positive and negative on the 3,300 line for registrar? So that's because you actually have no budget allocated there at the beginning. So you're spending money that you haven't allocated budgets, but you actually have 53,000 over in the electoral board side of things. Now, electoral board side of things, I think the intention is to pay out election officers and people who are actually working in elections. So although she pointed out that really voting is an election, so I'm paying people to run an election, it just happens to be in the office, not out in the precinct, right? It's in the central precinct. So maybe not material, like I said, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but just want to make sure you are aware, if you look at this and you're asking questions about why would it be, that's something that jumped out at me, and I want to make sure you understand that.
The city added to our budget in August to help with deputy registrar expenses, and where does that show up?
So the city actually didn't add to our budget in August. They agreed to add to the budget. And so finance says you won't see that money until you need it. So if we need it for the rundown year, this fiscal year, the city council has agreed to kick in up to $100,000, but that's an up to amount, not, oh, here you go, here's the money. It's, if you run over and you're over by up to $100,000, we'll put the money into your budget to make sure you're flat.
Okay, so we have not spent any of
We
that.
have not spent that, and actually that brings me to kind of my next point, and like I said, happy to take other questions on this, but I asked her, so I'm looking down at the end, kind of the bottom of the grand total, and I see that we're running at about 30%. That's on the right-hand side of the bottom. Oh, I have page 3 in here. For some reason, it says page 1, it's actually page 3. Sorry about that. If you look at this page, at the bottom, you see it's revenue totals, expense totals. If you just go across to the right-hand side, you'll see our total expected budget is from prior year, right, was $507,000 at 613, and our year-to-date transactions are 320, 189, 42, and that puts us at about 30%. And she thought that was a pretty healthy number. We're not overrunning over. We're actually running over what we would need for the year. Now, I told her, and I'll tell you, we have a $28,000 ballot charge that's going to come on to here. Now it's cost $28,000. So that would.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. So the ballots will cost us ballots will cost us $28,000, and I haven't got that into this yet. That still has to be paid by the end of this month, actually. But that will show up in here too. So it's a bigger number, but honestly, against this overall picture, I don't think it's going to change that number by maybe 1%.
Is Fort Orange in here yet?
Fort Orange has been paid, so they are in there. So just to back into Fort Orange,
And reduced by what, four orange
I'm
lines?
sorry, yeah, Fort Orange is the mailing service we use this year in order to send out our first run of absentee ballots. So I'll talk about the absentee ballots a little further in the report, but they did the first run and then we've been doing subsequent batches since that time. And they charged us, I think their initial estimate was for the number, have to look it up, but I think it was 3250 something, right, 3250. And we've done under that. So we actually, once we actually do all the math at the end of this, we should figure out what it is that we paid them for versus what we got and figure out if we get a credit back or how we do that. Also, we paid them for an estimated charge for postage, which was based on that original estimate. And if we don't get up to that number, then we should get something back on the postage. So once we kind of get clear of, everything else. Now, by the way, we did go and ask them for some additional envelope sets because we were using those envelope sets out of the office rather than doing a different envelope set. We just, if they were already prepared and ready, we asked them to send us, I think they did another, they were gonna give us 300, maybe it was 250 with what they rolled into the original, and then we ordered another 100, maybe 130. We got some additional ballots and some additional envelope sets, so that'll eat into that rebate a bit. But so once we get to the end of this, we'll kind of do all the reconciliation. We'll figure out. But I think we're going to get some either the credit if we decide, if you guys decide we want to use it again, or however we decide if we want that to be refunded to us, whatever. We'll have to discuss that. But I think we're running under the amount that we anticipated paying them for. Okay. Other questions on this or other budget items?
Anything else, Steve?
Out of the budget items.
Okay. No,
Okay.
just keep going.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the election right now. So we are well into the election, of course, 45 days before actual election day. And as we spoke a moment ago, it is right now broken down kind of into two things, which from the perspective of the elect actually is just really kind of into one, but just to give you some detail, we have sent, oh, I'm sorry, let me pull the screen, apologies. We have sent out 3,024 absentee ballots as of 10/26 of today, and we've received back 1,409 ballots as of today. That gives us about a 46% return rate on the absentee ballots. We have, as you see on the right-hand side there, a breakdown of what's been happening in early voting. And so this basically just comes off the tape. I just took it off the tape today. And we're at 1,802 early voters. And you can see the precinct breakdown. I put it in there for you so you can see some of that detail. And looking at the numbers, just comparing the 1,800 people that have voted in early voting versus a total voter, 55,825, I think that was the number on the previous slide. That's about a 3% rate of early voting. However, if you compare that to a typical state election turnout, and you use our numbers from 2021, our turnout numbers from 2021, they were about 46% of the total count of voters was the turnout. If you go against that, then our 1,800 voters mean, if we say we expect similarly in 2023, what we had in 2021, that means you've got about almost 8% of the voters that we expect to vote have voted in early voting. Does that make sense? I'm kind of moving some numbers around there, but just trying to get a sense of where we're at. And part of the reason for that is because I think it's interesting for us as a registrar board to have an idea about what do we expect in the precincts, right? So obviously we don't know, right? But if you want to go on historical data, you say we've got about 8% of the voters that have voted. That means those 8% won't be in the precincts, right? That's.
When you say 7.7%, is that just the 1,802, or is that the 1,802 plus the 1,409?
So the number I was looking for really was to think about who was, there was just, so it's just the 1802. And the reason is because those are the kind of the in-person voters. The absentee voters, obviously they're voting by mail, so, you know, we could do another number if you'd like and figure out, you know, kind of how that looks. But what was driving my thinking on just doing some numbers here was to say, okay, what do we expect is gonna happen in an election like this? And number one, if we compare it to previous elections that are similar, we had about a 46% overall turnout rate. And then if we say, well, how much of that is already voted? Then I would say about 7% of the voters that we expect have probably voted, 8% about
Well,
to turn up in person, right?
the early voting, they have cast their ballots.
Correct,
The absentee ballots, because they've not been processed, have not yet cast their ballots.
Correct.
So it makes sense to do it this way. I just wanted
yeah,
clarification.
yep. Other questions on that so far? And by the way, if you would like different, you know, analysis on this or some other right thoughts around this, if you'd like to see some other projections, let me know and we can think about that for another round of this. Obviously, by the time we get to the next meeting, we'll be through the election, so this particular analysis won't be relevant then, but something for us to think about for the next election. So, so just to go down the rest of the thing here, we have key dates. A deadline for requesting an absentee ballot is tomorrow, 10/27. So if you would like an absentee ballot and you need to get that requested to us immediately, I actually had a couple call today and they said, we'd like to get an absentee ballot. I said, well, since the deadline is tomorrow, do you have an email address? And I'll email you an application and you can print it, fill it out and scan it back to me. And I think I sent it over to Nancy this afternoon because they went ahead and just did that right away. So deadline for mailing the absentee ballots is to be postmarked by election day, November 7th, and then need to be received by noon on the third business day after the election. We have a holiday in there, so that actually pushes that date all the way out to Monday. So just be aware of that. On Monday, the 10th, the 10th is the holiday. It's 11th, 12th,
13th.
13th?
Yeah.
Yeah, because how can we have a weekend, right? 13th. Early voting closes on Saturday, November 4th. We will be working that weekend to take all of the poll book information and prepare it, get it put onto the poll books. And so that will happen late Saturday night, more likely Sunday during the day. And then we'll begin to distribute equipment starting on Monday for the election happening on Tuesday. Canvass begins 10 a.m. on Wednesday, November 8th, right? And just to make sure people who might be election officers are still getting in the election officer approval list. Training, we have combined lecture and hands-on training on 10/27 and 10/28, both starting at 1 p.m. That's Friday and Saturday. And we want to get everybody in through those trainings if they haven't finished their lecture and hands-on training. At this point, everyone should have finished the online training, and they should have sent Betty their report, their grade, if you will, right, on that. If anybody hasn't done that, they should get that done post-haste as well. We have chief and assistant chief training coming up on 10:30 and on 11/1, and that's at 7 p.m. in the evening. And then we have, starting really now, I say week of 10:30, but really it's starting now, our chief precinct walkthrough. So we're getting our chiefs to actually walk through the precincts, talk to each of the precincts. We've spoken to them, obviously not too long ago to get the ADA checking all done, but the chiefs themselves weren't able to go on those runs. So now we're getting them all lined up to visit the precinct and be prepared for what they need to do.
And your list of dates says pre-processing of ballots by CAP begins Monday, October 30th. Could you explain what that means?
Sure. So when you have an absentee voting, you're going to have a voter receive in the mail an envelope that has inside of it multiple envelopes, right? So inside that envelope is an envelope that you use to return everything to the registrar's envelope. Also inside that envelope is an envelope that is supposed to go around your ballot. Ballot has to be filled out, goes in the ballot envelope, which goes in the return envelope, which then comes to the registrar. The reason you have to have the envelope, and this, we've been talking about this in training, around your ballot is because you must identify the voter before you can accept their vote. And so you have no naked ballots, if you will, that is, that are unidentified, because you don't have to give the voter credit to, and therefore you can't take the vote. So when we get the mail back in the office, we will open the outer envelope and confirm that the inner outer envelope has been marked correctly. And if it's not marked correctly, if there's a problem with it, then it comes basically over to my office and I execute what's called a cure. That is, I reach out to the voter, I tell them their oath envelope is not filled out properly according to the law, and it has to be fixed before we could count their vote. And so I have a list of about, right now, it's about 30, I think probably another, I got another 4 or 5 today, probably get more like that before we're done, of envelopes, oath envelopes that are not actually filled out correctly. So I've been reaching out to voters. Sometimes they'll completely forget to fill out the other side. So then they can get that envelope, they can just fill it out and themselves and get it back to us, and then we can count it. Sometimes they put wrong information. Sometimes people will put a different year of birth than we show in VERA. So sometimes I've seen it put, like, they don't understand what the last 4 of SSN means, and they put some other number in there. And then we have to go back and try and get them to correct that. So just various kinds of errors that get made. But if it's not, if there's no errors, if it doesn't have to be cured, then it gets set aside for the CAT process. And then the CAT process, getting to Dave's question, eventually David's question is to actually begin to open those envelopes and to begin to process the voters, that is, give them voter credit, and then to actually put the ballots in line and run them. We have a high-speed scanner. We run them through the high-speed scanner and begin to tally votes.
And CAP is a central absentee precinct.
Central absentee precinct. Sorry, maybe that's all you wanted me to say. I don't know. Anyway, that's the process.
Okay, thank you.
So thinking through poll of training, it shows up as AB sent. There are some people who will have AB received by your office. So when does the information that we have received a ballot back from them get processed through Veris so that you can put that information in the poll book?
Yeah, so the information in Veris shows up as marked, and that means that we've received it back and we know that this voter basically has voted with the absentee ballot. Or if they come into the office and they vote early, it will show us on the machine. That information is all in the locality poll book file, which you download, and then that becomes part of the poll book, takes that information in and then weaves that into, with the precincts, users, and other pieces to it, into something that displays on the screen for the user.
So basically what the poll book is saying is we got a ballot back, not necessarily that it's gone through the scanner, just we got a ballot back from this person.
When it's marked, we basically have it marked as they have voted. It will also say issued. It should also say issued on the
Yeah,
poll book.
one is issued, it's gone out,
Right.
and then there's one that
It's
it has been
marked.
returned.
Right.
Okay, so
Yep.
so it might just be, I got the terminology wrong, so it doesn't necessarily say that they have voted that, it's just they returned their absentee ballot.
Right, but that's effectively what it means.
Effectively, yeah.
Effectively what it means. They can't, in other words, they can't check in on election day and vote again with another ballot because that ballot has already been recorded.
Okay.
And that's why we do the pre-processing, right? Which is to say, because in order to actually start, doing the actual pre-processing, actually looking, counting the ballots and making sure that we have it, you kind of need to know who sent it back. And I get calls all the time in the office, and Nancy can attest to this too, where someone says, did I get my ballot? Did you get my ballot? Did you get my ballot? And then we're able to quickly look into Veris and we can see, yep, I see you were sent a ballot and either it didn't come back, or I see you sent ballot and it came back. We got it.
On the mailing, do we have does the
By the
post
way,
office
Nancy
tell us
has
when
to
they
go-
have put it into the system?
We are conducting early voting, so I've asked Nancy to go back and make sure we close out our early voting correctly, because I need her to do that, because I'm gonna be here.
Yeah.
So go ahead, repeat your question.
One of the things that Fort Orange Press said with the code that they put on the return envelope was that once it went into the postal system, it would be scanned and we
Yes.
would be notified that it has been mailed by the voter, whether we've received it or not. Is that working?
So I do get a file. They subscribe me to the file that comes from the postal service every day. The data in there is, let's just say, spotty. It doesn't always show what happened, because I know I've gotten ballots back that don't show as being returned. Generally, probably the more reliable data is that it actually went out. However, it has columns of was delivered to the post office, and it was delivered to the voter, and then that same ballot is sent back by the voter. The columns show times that don't make any sense. They sometimes show conflicting dates. So I don't really trust the actual data. In general, if it shows something that's going out, I think that's probably accurate. But beyond that, it requires everyone in the postal system to consistently handle these. I just don't have confidence.
So it's more a postal system issue rather than Fort Orange Press?
Absolutely, postal system.
Okay.
So they've done what they could do. Basically, they subscribe me to the thing. They've given the postal system. Actually, it's on the outside envelope. So that's all there with the postal system. And then the postal system is supposed to track it, and it's spotty.
Okay.
And then I'm just gonna chime in here.
Yeah.
Steve, I think you were asking if the scanner part was working, correct?
Well, I just wanted to, I was just curious whether when the
comes
voter
back.
sends it back and there's a scanner, there's a barcode, whether that was working, and apparently.
No, that is not working.
So that's
Okay, so
actually,
it's a post office issue,
well,
not Fort Orange Press.
actually, I was answering a different question.
Oh,
So
okay.
apologies, I didn't understand the question. Nancy got the question better than I did.
Okay,
So there is a scan and a post office process that sends it back, but Fort Orange Press does put on those envelopes an identification for the voter.
Correct.
And we have found that first of all, the window for that data is not really aligned correctly. So that's something we need to talk to Fort Orange Press about. But the second thing is that voter identification. The goal of it is you take a scanner, which you have connected to Verus, you scan it, and it pops up the voter, and that just, you don't have to do so much typing.
makes life easier.
But what we found is about 10% of the barcodes don't really read right. So what I did was I talked to Arlington, the registrar over there as well, and said, hey, we're seeing that, this works sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't seem to find the right voter, it doesn't seem to find the voter at all. And she said, yeah, we've experienced about a 10% hit rate. I said, yeah, actually counting, I had someone actually do that, scan, count how many went, how many didn't, and it was about 10%. So it could be a printing issue, so that's something that we can talk about with the vendor. By eye, the barcode looks okay, but maybe the scanner is more sensitive, and if it's a little fuzzy, it just doesn't pick it up. So.
And we can talk with them about it after the election.
Yeah, of course, right. There's nothing to be done now. It is what it is, right? So. Okay, any other questions on this or absentee voting or early voting?
I think not.
Okay. We'll go on to ongoing projects. I think there's not really any surprises on this. Let's see. So I actually reached out to Piper today to see if we had anything back on this security question. We could put that grant in for the Homeland Security money. She didn't get back to me. I'm assuming that means probably nothing back yet, but we'll find out. We'll see. She'll let me know. I have on our list a separation of duties document for the electoral board and registrar. I know we haven't gotten to that yet, so this is just a placeholder for now. I think we closed out, correct me if I'm wrong, the electoral board manual updates. And I think skipping down also the office election manual update, I have them both closed in my list. I still have open the one in between there, which is the electronic Holbrook destruction. I have gotten some quotes on what would need to happen for that. Unless I want to have them punch a hole in the whole laptop, which costs about 5 times as much as punching a hole in the hard drive, I would need to get the hard drives removed. I did talk to IT about that. They're not excited about doing that. They say that's your problem. Your poll books, we don't have anything to do with that. So I need to figure that out still. But it's not an urgent item. It's just something that we need to take care of. They're really past end of life, and the records retention says we really need to.
Smashing hard drives sounds like a great high school fundraiser.
Yeah, although they, I mean, they do it right. They actually have like a thing that punches a hole, just stick it in and punches the hole in the drive, so.
How about a large electromagnet?
Yeah, I mean, well, so actually, so here's what little research I did on this is there are security requirements for electronic destruction. And there's a whole set of standards for what you have to do. So while that might do the trick, you might have to prove that it's actually meeting those standards in order to really use a big electromagnet for that. So anyway, we have a item we're going to talk about, I think, today in your agenda, which is the relocation of the precinct. Also, I think you may have the agenda either, you may or may not have the agenda today, but I know we've been potentially talking about looking at the length of officer of election appointments. And also, I think you're talking maybe today about the background check, how long that will be, how long that will be on our agenda. And that's what I have for this. Last slide is just making sure we heard the announcements, which I think everybody has by now. Early voting continues till Saturday, November 4th, and it's open right now. I still have people calling saying, hey, can I come vote today? The answer is yes. Just come by 5 o'clock. We close the poll at 5. And open at 9. Applications will be accepted for absentee ballots until October 27th. That's tomorrow. So if anybody still needs to get that done, email me because it's otherwise you won't get it. We are slightly overbooked for our combined training on Friday, but have slots on Saturday. So we're looking at our training coming up. Friday is full, but Saturday is not. So if you plan to attend training, please consider Saturday. And if you're on Friday, you'll probably have a better training session if you can come on Saturday instead of Friday. Don't everybody do that, but some people do that probably, even others have. If you're an election officer, please make sure you have given us the information for a background check. And I have the link here. And if someone needs me to email it to them, I can happily do that. I'm not sure if anybody has. That's what I have.
Thank you very much, Dan. I don't see any specifics listed under old business. Is there anything we need to consider there? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. First item there is appointment of new election officers. Betty, is this from you? Okay. If we could tell us what we're looking at.
There are 22 people who have applied to be election officers, and they're in various stages of getting us their paperwork, getting through the training. So we're working on putting them to work. And they're, like I said, 22.
We should probably read the names.
I'll make a motion that we approve this list of applicants.
Under discussion, I would just say that we should approve them pending them completing the application process, which includes the oath, the application form, and background check.
Wait, we should do that. They get appointed now. They just don't get to be put in a precinct if they haven't done all this.
Whatever.
I think we agree on it. Let's vote in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, so motion adopted. Thank you.
I think under this one, we also wanted to train a little bit.
Go ahead, Steve, when you do that.
We'll get chief's training next Monday and Wednesday, we also have a lot of new chiefs and assistant chiefs, and I have volunteered to provide a voluntary training session for the new chiefs and assistant chiefs. There were a lot of things when I came in as a chief that I wish I'd known before my first session. So we have several people that are going to come for what I call a fast start tutorial. And that will give them a framework in which to put the training that we're going to have on Monday and Wednesday. But one thing we have been talking about by email is what exactly we're going to have in the chiefs and assistant chiefs training next week. And I don't know whether we wanted to discuss this here or continue in email format, to put it all together for the training on Monday and Wednesday.
Steve, do we have an existing outline?
Well, I emailed a list of topics, and I think there's a couple of other topics, like we need to go over Dropbox again. It's not on the list that I sent about 3 o'clock today. There's about 5 or 6 items on that list that I think we should include, but I'm certainly open to suggestions of, what to keep or dispense with from the other 2 members of the board. But I think Betty just said, what do you think needs to be on there? So I gave you that list. If you want to look at it and discuss whether we have everything or not, then we can sort out who's going to cover what topic. So, and I don't remember everything I put on there, but I do know I should have put Dropbox on.
That sounds to me like it's appropriate for a continued email discussion.
Okay.
Next item under new business is background checks, as expiration and renewal. Dan, are you the person to speak about this?
Sure, I can, sure. So we have background checks done for election officers from past years, but only 3 of them actually were done since the previous election, that is this year, since last November. So one of the questions I posed to the board is, what is the policy, or what should be the policy, what policy would you like to have on how often we need to do background checks? So we're talking really about returning officers. Obviously for new officers, we would do the background checks new. But for returning officers who've had a background check prior to the previous election, but say, for example, most of them were done just looking at the numbers between maybe September of 2022 and November, right? They didn't really start before August, probably is the earliest ones I'm going to see for the previous election. So the question I have is it possible to accept those background checks as being valid for this election, this year and some months, as opposed to redoing all those background checks? And my 2 cents for what it's worth is, I think there's just scanning the data. I don't think there's 1 in 100 that had any questions at all about their background, right? So I think generally speaking, the offices of election, people who apply to the offices of election are not those who they don't have a felony record, because if they did, they would not be a voter, right, in Virginia, right? They wouldn't even get through the first gate of being a voter, right? And so, while I think it's prudent to do background checks, I think that, we could go crazy on this, and perhaps we don't need to for the population of officers of election for the most part that we have.
Okay, the question about whether they're a voter, that the disqualification only applies to felonies, I believe.
Correct, that's right.
So you have 3 from earlier this year,
Correct.
but what were you saying about back to September 22nd of this year or last year?
Of last year. So we were able, with David's help, to get the NCSI records back. They were there. We couldn't have access to them, but we managed to work that out. So now I can look back for, I think it's a matter of, I think it's three years and change of all the background checks. So I basically just scan back across, and I'm recognizing, all the names, not all, but a lot of the names, because they're returning officers of the election for this year. And so I realized that most of them were not done within a 1 year time frame, or will not be done within a 1 year time frame from our November election. But they're really 1 year and probably within 1 year and 3 months for most of them. And the question is, do we need to redo this check for this November, for those returning officers of election?
My memory is that our tradition is to appoint officers of election year by year, just 1 year at a time. Something we've discussed but not acted on is making the multi-year appointments. And to me, it would be appropriate to do a background check at the beginning of an appointment, but then not repeat it during the term of that appointment, whether that's 2 years or 3 years or something else.
Yeah, that makes sense, but just so you're aware, in this particular cycle, I only have 3 people that would meet the criteria you just mentioned.
Right, because everybody right now, their appointment began on March 1st.
Well, and actually, having said that, you're right, it's March 1st, so
Right.
I think a couple of these were done in February, so they might not even meet that criteria, so.
So the question then is, do we count last year's background checks or do we run new ones in the next week?
Correct,
How-
and I'm staged to do that. I can do that if you want to do that. I can do that. I actually have two background check services that, will take less than a week to get the background back. I can do that starting tomorrow.
Okay, so let me venture that the purpose of the background check is to make sure that we have decent upstanding citizens. And most of the decent upstanding citizens that we had last year have continued to remain decent upstanding citizens. So since we're going to take a look, I think, at item D, the reappointment standards, so that we might actually be looking at a 2-year. Going forward, if we end up with 2-year appointments, they would only need 1 background check during that 2-year appointment, as I understand the mood of the board. So while granted, it would not count between last year and this year, the time frame is still approximately the same. So if we would use a background check for a 2-year appointment, would it not be logical to use a single background check for 2 1-year appointments?
I think you just said we don't need to do a new round for people who just have had a background check in the last year.
I would vote in favor of counting the background checks that were done in the lead up to last year's general election.
Okay, so to be specific, let's say, we would say between July and July of 2022, I'm just picking a date and you could adjust either way, up to, this election, we would say anybody who's had a background check during that time, we would not need to repeat it. Or you can pick the, the cutoff point for the back or for the forward, whatever you feel is appropriate.
Well, you said most of them were done in September. Did we have
Yeah,
any in
that's correct.
August?
I'm just hedging the bets a little bit in case there was a tail in August. But yeah, look to me, when I'm just looking at the numbers, quickly, it looks like the dates were 9 something, 9 something, 9 something. I might have had a couple in August. So just asking you to decide where you want to draw the line and we can go from there.
August 1st.
I think I hear a motion.
You do.
Okay. The motion is that we regard background checks that have been done since August 1st, 2022, be counted as valid for this election cycle this year. I will second number 2. Any discussion before we vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it. Motion approved. Thank you. Next item under new business is relocation of precinct 204. Who is leading that discussion? Me. Okay, oh, we're talking about Fairview.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good reminder. Yes, I visited Fairview Christian about 6 weeks ago with Dan, and it was my first time actually visiting that location. And it's not very handicap friendly. The parking that's provided is on a slope. It's a pretty fair walk from there to the door entrance. The actual door has about a 3-inch lip that has to be overcome. Which is, and there's not a good place there to install a ramp.
I did get a map, by the way, sorry.
Uh,
I did go and found a map that actually will act as a ramp, so for our ADA requirements, we've taken care of that, but to your point, it's natively not that friendly.
And if you park on the street directly in front of the entry door, there's a set of steps that's about 4 steps high that has to be overcome as well. So I visited Fairview Community Center after we visited Fairview Christian, and it is, it's, I think, everything that we need to have. The handicap access is much better. There are small parking lot, looks like it's gonna accommodate 20 cars and several reserved spaces and a short travel there to the entry door. No lift at the entry door. I talked to the facility manager who was very open to having us there. They normally have after-school programs for kids, but not on election day. School. And I talked this morning with the director of Parks and Recreation to let him know we were considering this. He had no objections at all. And so what I'd like to offer right now is a motion that we start the process of changing the precinct. Fairview, precinct 204, changing the polling location from Fairview Christian to Fairview Community Center. This is a change that will need to be approved by city council. There's another, they will follow their own notice requirements. So I'd like to get that started right away so we can implement that if there's a March presidential primary for the Republican Party. We have that in place already. It is a 60-day notice requirement for an enacted change such as this. For a general election, for a primary, the notice requirement to voters is only 15 days. So I think we can get this done in time. So that is my motion at this time, is that we begin the process of asking city council to make that change. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, well, 2 questions. One, what is it, about 5 blocks from the church?
Not far.
Okay, on the same side of the street. And have you discussed the ADA requirements with the people at the church?
At the community center?
No, at the church.
No.
Does it seem likely that they could or would make the accommodations for ADA that you require for a polling place?
To me, significant expense would be involved. Dan, do you say?
Yeah, I would agree. So the dilemma they face is they have a parking lot that's away from the door, the entrance door they use for people coming into the precinct. It is, you'd have to go pretty much right around the building to get to the door. They would need to somehow level the parking lot. They would have to put parking closer, have to put handicap spots in near the door. The stairway to the other side, even if they try to do something with that, they'd be putting in a ramp. So I'm not saying they couldn't or wouldn't do it, but it's definitely, not something they could do easily.
Conceivably cost prohibitive,
I think it would be cost prohibitive
especially for a church that size.
for a church that size. You could give them the option, but I think they would decline.
They would have to significantly change the shape of their building. So, yeah, I don't think it's feasible. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye, ayes have it, and motion to adopt. Thank you. Next item is reappointment of current election officers. Who needs to lead us on this discussion?
I think I brought it up. We have been doing election officers every year, which has its own set of issues, reappointing every election officer every year. We are allowed by state code to appoint for up to 3 years. And I think the idea that we have talked about is, well, the idea that I talked about was after the election, and after the chiefs have given their reports on their new people, those who have provided acceptable service for this coming year, we extend their appointments. And the reason for that is we have a presidential primary on March 5, and if new appointments start on March 1st, how do we get everybody trained in time for a March 5 primary? So my suggestion was, after this election, we we extend the appointment of one-year appointments of those people who have performed well, which should be almost everyone. And cover that dilemma we had in March. And then also after the November election, possibly at the December election, discuss whether or not to start making 2-year appointments for returning election officers and continue to have 1-year appointments for new election officers until we find out how they're going to work out. And that's the discussion that we've been having. I'm not sure if we're prepared to make any kind of a motion at this point, but I did want to bring it up with an idea of discussing it again as possibly an action item at the December meeting.
I'm in favor of the idea, and Steve, you mentioned we're going to be surveying precinct chiefs. Would you not remind me who we're surveying and what about the implementation of this election?
For the past several years, precinct chiefs have been given a sheet on which they were asked to rate, if you will, the members of their team, the election officers that served with them. And it's basically essay. It's not really a scale that I can recall, but basically, did they do a good job? Did they not do a good job? Any comments like, they did a really good job on this, they were really sharp about that, they were lazy, didn't want to do anything. I mean, you get to put those kinds of things down, and it's the chief's response. And we have a policy that we have initiated where if we have a complaint about an election officer, we can discuss it and give them a chance to respond to any complaints about them. But there is a form that's, I guess it's been done at least 3 or 4 or more years, that the chiefs were asked to turn in within a week. I was trying to get mine done by next day, just to get it out of the way. But that's the form that I'm talking about. And if we continue to do that, then that would be a form that would tell us, okay, these people worked well, and so let's go ahead and do what we want to. If we have a problem with someone, we can determine on a case-by-case basis whether we want to make it a 2-year appointment the next time, and possibly even do some remedial work if necessary. So it's short answer to your question is that's important.
Thank you for that reminder. I think conceivably, if we began a policy of 2-year appointments halfway through the term, perhaps after the November election, we could review if we had any problems with a particular election officer. We could choose in that case, to not make a reappointment, is that right?
The purpose of waiting,
Not to extend it.
the purpose of waiting until December is to know how well they worked at this election, particularly if it's their first time. And we have a number of first-time people. I just want the chief to tell me, how did they do? So that we have some kind of a report and not just, willy-nilly everybody. And again, if we do get a concern from the chief, then the electoral board would talk with the election officer and give them an opportunity to present their side before we made a final decision, but then we already have a policy on that.
Great, I think acting on this at our next board meeting would be appropriate. And can I ask you to draft something in writing that we can have to
Okay.
put in the details. Thank you for that. I think this would be very helpful. Okay. Is there any other new business before we turn to public comments? We are at the public comment section of our meeting, and is there anyone in the public who would like to be heard? And we actually have a microphone. Two microphones.
There's two, actually.
Terrific, okay. Would anyone like to be heard? Jeff? Take a microphone. But you have to put it back. Yes. That's what it's done.
Yeah, no, true.
Just as a rule of policy in Robert's rules, comments should be addressed to the board, not to the.
Oh, okay, so I should face, that's why the microphone. is-
Yes.
Yes, I'm sure everybody can hear you, but.
Okay, I have a few comments, but mostly several questions. And I'm glad that one of the questions I was going to ask has been answered in the registrar's report, which is a follow-up to what Carolyn Shareko asked for the last meeting. The numbers on number of absentee ballots sent out and the numbers returned. And any further information on absentee ballots, and particularly on some of the statistics from the Postal Service, which were not completely satisfactory apparently, is important. And particularly because there have been continuing problems with the mail, including electoral mail. And I just want to give one example I just heard about last night. In the Richmond area, there were some absentee ballots which were properly mailed by the registrar. And then they sat in the post office for 2 weeks. Now, one other related question that was asked at the last meeting was a request to have actions on inactive voters made public. So I'm asking whether those will be made public. Okay, so that was my first question. All right, on another topic, the Lynchburg Democratic Committee recognizes the need for election officers nominated by party chairs and is continuing recruitment efforts. However, and I'm sure the electoral board is aware of this, but the audience may not be. But I just did want to point out that all election officers, whether they're Democratic, Republican, or non-affiliated, need to be completely impartial and nonpartisan in their duties. One of the 2 oaths that election officers take is the same oath of office as the registrar and electoral board members. And it does say, or the in taking the oath, the election officer will say, "I will faithfully and impartially discharge all the duties incumbent upon me." Okay, also on election officers, about a year ago, there was a report listing election officer names, affiliations, and positions. Positions meaning chief, assistant chief, or poll worker. So my second question is, will there be a similar report this year? Still another topic. We've had reports from some localities of authorized representatives challenging voters and also trying to prevent voters from using smartphones. Use of a smartphone is allowed as long as there is no communication with the outside and the voter does not take any photos or videos. So my third question is, have there been any such incidents where an authorized representative interferes with the voter in this way? Have there been any such incidents in Lynchburg in early voting? And finally, this of course has been in the newspapers. Some individuals that previously had their rights restored have then had them, what we could call unrestored, lost those rights. And that was an error. There's a process that appears to be still going on, and some of this has been referred to the registrars. So my fourth question is, are there any cases of this kind in Lynchburg? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Jeff. Dan or my colleagues, does anyone want to respond to any of
Sure.
this?
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely. So, so to the question of inactive voters, I think we have to do a little deeper dive to understand a little bit more. I'm still learning about how the state does their NCOA process. So they apparently do 2 mailings a year based on NCOA, and NCOA is National Change of Address. So they do a mailing twice a year. It seems like, I thought it was more frequently, but when I asked recently, they said, no, it's like it's twice a year. And if someone doesn't respond to that mailing, then they essentially get marked as inactive after a certain period of time not responding. I've actually been talking with my staff and a little bit with the electoral board. I haven't really dug into it with them so much yet about how we can do a better job in the office of using maybe NCOA data that we could have access to really chase down voters, figure out, do they actually move out of state? Do they move within the locality? And can we actually run down the number of just people who are missing off the rolls and actually identify, get them re-registered in the proper place, because that seems to be what happens. Like, for example, in our locality, because we have college students, most of them at Liberty, but we have them also at Lynchburg University. They tend to move, they're fairly transient, right? And sometimes they just move out of the location altogether. Sometimes they move around in the city, but they just get lost out of the system. So a big chunk of our inactive voters are actually students that have moved and we just lost track. So to answer your question, we're not there yet, but I do want to dig into that question a little more and figure out, is there a way we could be more proactive about, activating inactive voters? Right? Eventually they roll off the rolls, and if they're out of state, maybe that's appropriate, but if they're in state, we really would like to keep them either on our rolls or somebody else's. So that's something still on my radar. Haven't not gotten all the way to the end of that, but still something that we're thinking about and talking about.
Can I pick up on that?
Sure,
before
please.
you go to the
Yeah, please
next
go.
question? We have been training our election officers that if someone comes into the poll and they are listed as inactive on the poll book, they hand them a voter registration form and have them go to the chief, so the chief can check them in with the voter registration form in hand. Because one of the main reasons for inactive is we've lost them. So we get the voter registration form filled out, and now we found them again. And we've already got them there, we're just having current, accurate information now. And then we just let them go ahead and vote. But that's how we handle it. Someone shows up to vote that's listed as inactive. We get the correct information and then let them vote.
Okay, and the one other thing to be aware of on that is if for some reason you're in the wrong precinct, you do have to go back to your original precinct where you're registered in order to vote. So that's the piece of that. Okay, the election officers report, I'm gonna skip over that one. And leave that one for, I think, Betty and Julie to speak on. But I expect probably we will, I mean, there's a list that we posted on the wall that's there today. So if you want to come down to the office and take a look at it, it's publicly posted. Obviously, it's been in transition, but that's by code, we have it posted. And it's in transition as we, continue to get our list. I mean, obviously, we're still appointing people even today, so that will evolve, and we'll have that finalized, obviously, before election day, but you can look at the current state today.
The list on the wall has names only, I believe. However, the party chair can request a list that has much of that other information you asked for. Some of that we consider not something the public needs, but party chairs have access to that information. And it's just requested from the registrar to be provided, and that's by code.
To address the question about videos, I've done 2 interviews with public media during early voting. For the most part, that has not been times when the voters are voting, so I was not concerned about them filming in the precinct. We did that after hours, but I've had two interviews with videos in there. We did also have one person who came in who was videoing when they weren't coming to vote, and we tried to address that as best we could. That was the previous registrar and so for colleagues. So that's the summary that I have of the videos.
And on smartphones, by code, people are allowed to take pictures of themselves and their own ballot and nothing else. And I don't think anyone would complain if someone comes in and doesn't recognize the names on the ballots and looks up information on their smartphone to try and identify who the candidates are, since they can't go back outside once they're inside and have their ballots. But so far as anything beyond that, I don't think it's allowed by law, but those 2 particular things are allowed, and I don't think any of the chiefs would deny someone the right to do that.
And to your last question about right to restore, we definitely have been involved with that. So Nancy actually has taken an active role in sorting that out. So we've been back and forth with elect. They gave us some names and then they said, oh, wait a minute, actually this isn't right. And so there's been a bit of back and forth with that. Nancy actually has taken a pretty active role in working with elect to make sure that the names that we're getting for right to restore are correct. And I have email trails and I'm copy on with them doing that back and forth. So yeah, we have gotten a list of people who had their rights taken away, potentially wrongly, and then they were sent back to us to be reinstated. And then we discovered some of them are supposed to be reinstated, actually had another felony. So it's been a little bit of back and forth, but we're actively engaged in making sure that aspect gets cleaned up.
One other thing I wanted to say, authorized representatives should not be interfering in any way for any reason with voters. If an authorized representative has a question, they should address the chief about their question concerning the use of smartphones. And the chief, who hopefully paid attention in training, will know what is allowed and what is not allowed. But if an authorized representative interacts with a voter, they violated their right to be there. And if a complaint is made to the chief, that authorized representative can be removed from the precinct.
Okay, are there any other voters that would like to, members of the public would like to be heard? Thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate your attention and following what we do. And our next meeting then, the voting canvas will start the day after the election. And that's the process of reviewing the precinct results, including provisional ballots from every precinct. And the provisional ballots particularly are in closed session. A party representative can be present at those, but that's it. That will likely take us the 3 days right after the election to accomplish. And then our next public meeting will be Thursday, December 6th.
3 business days. The 3 business days, since Friday's a holiday, so we will be meeting on Monday for the canvas and December 7th at 3 p.m.
December 8th.
Whatever the
December
Thursday is. Whatever the Thursday is, did you ask for it to start an hour early?
I think we're still up in the air on this. The canvas dates, I think we're still up in the air on. And as we mentioned today, that December 7th, probably, we can start at 3 p.m. Okay,
December 7th, 3, okay.
yes,
Got the right month now.
okay. Good, all right, I think we're done then. Yes, could you take the microphone, please?
I don't think I need it.
Yes, you do, please, take the microphone.
My name is Judith Farrer, I'm a citizen. I just want to say, I can't do what you're all doing, but as a citizen, I sure appreciate everything that is being done for our community and the voters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Here's my favorite part of the meeting, adjourn.